Chapter 24. Father Feodorit. The moment arrived when I finally managed to pay a visit to Father Feodorit. Back in the taiga, in response to my question as to whether there were any people in our world with knowledge and abilities similar to hers, only living closer to home, Anastasia had replied, quote, "There are people in various corners of the earth whose lifestyle is not caught up in the prevailing technocracy. They all have different abilities. But in your world, there is also one person you will find it easy to approach, whether it be winter or summer. The power of his spirit is very great. Quote, do you know where he lives? Can I see him and talk with him? Quote, yes, you can. Who is he? He is your father, Vladimir. Quote, what do you mean? Oh, Anastasia, I so much wanted to hear proof that you're right about everything, and here it's all coming out the wrong way. My father died 18 years ago and was buried in a little town." Anastasia sat on the grass, her back leaning against a tree, her knees drawn up close to her chest, and silently looked at me in the eye. She seemed a little sad, as though she were taking pity on me. Then she lowered her head to her knees. I thought she might be feeling upset over her mistake regarding my father, and I tried to comfort her. Don't get too upset, Anastasia. It's probably because, as you yourself said, you don't have that much strength left. Anastasia didn't speak for a while, then raised her head and once more, looking at me right in the eye, said, quote, my strength has indeed lessened, but not to the point where I could be mistaken. Then she proceeded to relate events that had taken place 26 years ago. She recounted the past not only with great accuracy and in minute detail, but was even able to convey nuances of inner feelings. It is understandable how one can pick up clues from the outward appearance, a barely noticeable facial expression, a body position, even the eyes, can all give clues as to what an interlocutor is thinking. But how she was able to discern the past as though it were simply a documentary newsreel is still a mystery to me. Anastasia herself was not able to explain this phenomenon in a standard, comprehensible manner. But this is what she had to say. Quote, not far from Moscow is the Trinity Sergiev Monastery complex in the town of Sergiev Posad. Behind Trinity Sergiev's massive ancient walls, there is a seminary, an academy, and several cathedrals, in addition to the monastery proper. The cathedrals are open to the people, and anyone who wishes can come and pray in this holy place. It was not destroyed even during the campaigns of persecution against believers. Indeed, right through this period, the institutions behind these walls continued to function uninterrupted, providing a place where the monastic brethren could serve God. 26 years ago, on the very day I came into this world, she continued, a young man in his late teens walked through the gates of the Trinity Sergiev Monastery. He toured the museum and then proceeded to visit the main cathedral, where a sermon was being read by a tall, gray-haired monk. Both the monk's height and his rank were well above average. This was Father Feodorit, the archimandrite of the Trinity Sergiev Monastery. The young man listened to his sermon. Later, when Father Feodorit withdrew, he followed him into one of the treasury rooms, unhindered by the temple staff. Going up to Father Feodorit, he started talking to him about the sermon, and Father Feodorit spoke with him for a long time. The young man had been baptized, but did not have much inner faith. He did not observe the fasts, did not take communion, and did not attend church regularly. But that day marked the beginning of a friendship between Father Feodorit and the young man. The young man started paying visits to the monastery. Father Feodorit would talk with him and show him the sanctuary, normally off limits to ordinary parishioners. The monk gave him books which he lost. The monk placed a little cross on a chain around his neck, and it was lost as well. The monk gave him a second one, a most unusual one. It opened like a tiny case, but it too was lost. The monk would even take the young man into the refectory and seat him at the same table as the monks. Each time he would give him a little money. He never rebuked him for anything and always looked forward to his arrival. This went on for a whole year. The monk visited the monastery every week, but one day he left. I beg your pardon. The young man visited the monastery every week, but one day he left and did not return the following week. He did not come after a month, even after a whole year. The monk still waited. Now, 25 years later have passed already. The monk is still waiting. 25 years, Vladimir, your spiritual father has been waiting for you, that great Russian monk, Father Feodorit. Quote, I went far away from the monastery to Siberia. I sometimes thought of Father Feodorit, I responded, as though justifying my actions to myself or to someone else. Quote, but you did not write him even one letter, observed Anastasia. Quote, I want to see him. Quote, and what will you tell him? Perhaps about how you made money, were happy, in love, and simply went astray? How many times were you at death's door, but at the last moment you were delivered from your woes? He will see all of that for himself just by looking at you. He prayed for forgiveness of your sins, and time after time saved you through his prayers. He still believes, just as he did 25 years ago. He was hoping for something different from you. Quote, what was it, Anastasia? What does Father Feodorit know? What does Father Feodorit know? What does he want? Quote, I cannot comprehend it, at least not now. It was something he felt intuitively. Tell me, Vladimir, do you remember the conversations you had with him? Do you remember what you saw in the monastery treasury room? Quote, it's all very fuzzy in my mind. After all, it was so long ago, I can only remember isolated scenes. Try to remember them. I shall help you. Father Feodorit would talk with me each time in various places in the monastery. I remember some underground rooms, at least they were partially underground. I remember the refectory, the long table where the monks took their supper, and I had supper with them. It was during a time of some sort of fast. The food was especially prepared for the fast, but I liked it. Quote, did you have any unusual impressions or feelings during your visits to the monastery? Quote, once, after supper, I left the refectory and went through a passageway to an inner courtyard of the monastery complex, heading for an exit. The gate was already closed to parishioners. The courtyard was empty. Those massive high walls blocked out the noise from the city beyond. All I could see around me were the cathedrals. Everything was completely silent. I stopped. It seemed as though I could hear a solemn music playing. I needed to leave. There was a monk on duty at the gate to let me out and bolt the gate shut after me. But I just stood there and listened to that music and eventually slowly made my way over to the gate. You never heard that music again? You never experienced the same impression? No, I didn't. Quote, did you ever try to hear that music, to call up the impression of it from within? Quote, yes, but I never managed to. I even tried standing on that same spot the next time I came, but unfortunately, Try to think of something else, Vladimir. Quote, now you're interrogating me. You recounted everything so accurately, everything that happened to me 26 years ago. You tell me how I felt back then.